Welcome back to Maintenance Monday. Now it's getting to the time of year where you may well want to consider installing mudguards onto your bike to help keep you and your riding buddies safe. So coming up in this video is a little guide on how to install mudguards and some tips to help you along the way. I'm going to be installing them on my Canyon Grail gravel bike because it's the only bike I have with dedicated mudguard eyelets or mounting points. That's these small threaded inserts at key places around the frame, such as on the seat stays here, down on the seat tube, and if you've got a rim brake bike, there'll also be a mounting point up at the caliper here. And on the front of our bike, we've got some inserts on the fork legs and also up at the fork crown, or again, if you have a rim brake bike, up by the caliper. There are also mudguards that will fit on bikes that don't have any mounting points or eyelets and will clip in place, although these tend not to offer the same amount of protection as ones that fit onto dedicated mounting points, and as such they can rattle around and eventually wear and damage away the paint on your bike, so be careful. So what are you going to need? Of course, you're going to need your mudguards. These are specific to the Canyon Grail, but there's loads of different versions out there suitable for all different types of bike. And included with your mudguards, you may well have some instructions, and you're also going to have all of your fixtures and fittings. Now, if like me, you haven't had the little rubber grommets or covers over the mudguard eyelets on your frame, chances are they may well be full up with grit and grime from where you've been out riding in the rain and dirty conditions. So it may well be worth taking the time to spray a little bit of maintenance spray or lubrication in there to try and clean some of that grit and grime out. Then you can also take a couple of the screws from your fitting kit and just thread them through to make sure there's no issue or resistance when you go to fit the mudguards. Depending on the bike and the mudguards you've got, the tools that you'll need are some small Allen keys or Torx keys, depending on the specific fixings that you have. And the first step you're going to need to do is remove the wheels from your bike. You can already see I've done that. Then lay out the front and the rear mudguards on a workbench or on the floor in front of you, and then allocate all of the different bolts and fixings to the front and the rear mudguard, and you can use your instructions to help indicate which ones go where. But lay out everything you've got so you've got a clear starting point to work from. And then what we'll do, we'll first look to install the mudguard on the rear of the bike. And the first port of call will be to attach the mounting points on the seat stays here, holding it all in place and then only doing the fixings up hand tight so far. With one hand holding it in place, you can then use an Allen key, carefully thread them in. When you install these, remember only do them up finger tight or leave them fairly loose so that the mudguard can move around and we can position it later on. Next up is installing the bolt and the fixing at the seat tube of the bike, and this is specifically why I explained about leaning all of the bolts out, laying them out so you know what is where, and reading the instructions, because I didn't listen to my own advice, and as such I wasn't sure which bolt to use, and also why it's important to clean the thread out, because it'll mean that the bolt is installed nice and easily. Thread the bolt through the relevant hole on the mudguard, like so. Then we can take a little washer, like that, and then guide it through. So that's the mudguard for the rear of the bike installed and in place, but like I've said, all of the fixings are still hand tight and fairly loose, and as such, we can lift the mudguard up, we can position it forwards and backwards here. This fixing is still loose and so is that, so that we can then install the wheel into place and then position the mudguard correctly, because it's important that it doesn't contact the tyre at any point, not only so it doesn't rub, but also so we can position it correctly to offer the best protection from all of the mud and spray. And it's important to also note that the thread and the bolts that go into the frame don't need to be too tight, probably only in the region of 2 to 3 Newton meters at most, and the same for the other fixings on the mudguards themselves, because they only have small threads and in some cases thread into plastic. So the next thing we can do is install the rear wheel and look to position the mudguard correctly. Now that I've got the wheel in place, it's super obvious to see why we have to adjust and position the mudguard. And I do need to point out that the bolt at the front is only holding the mudguard in place. Once we've got these other fixings tightened up correctly, we can remove the wheel and then torque this bolt up to again keep it all in nice and the correct position. So the first thing to do is to start to lower and position the mudguard much closer down to the tyre. So we can just carefully move each different arm and it sits at the correct height, bringing the mudguard down closer to the tyre. What we're trying to achieve is a fairly even distance all of the way around the mudguard, so there's no risk of any debris getting caught in between it, or that the tyre is going to contact it when you're riding over some bumpy or rough terrain, for example. And somewhere around there, you can follow all the way around and see we've got a fairly equal distance. And then looking at the back of the bike, you can also see that it's sat centrally over the tyre itself. Now with the wheel in place, we can then hold the mudguard with our one hand so it doesn't move from where we just carefully positioned it. And then with our free hand, we can work our way around and do all of the fixing points up slightly tighter to hold it in the correct place that we've just worked hard to set. So that's the rear mudguard installed, and as you can see, it's a little bit of a fiddly process, but take your time and get it right first time round. Otherwise, you're just going to be kicking yourself when you're out riding your bike and your mudguards are rattling around, causing all sorts of annoying noises. And for the front mudguard, it's the same process. Just repeat the steps of installing the section of the mudguard down on the fork legs, then the piece up at the top of the crown. Keep the fixings only hands tight, then you can install the wheel. Position the mudguard correctly so we've got that equal distance all the way around and the mudguard is sat centrally. Then we can go and tighten all of the fixtures up to the recommended torque setting. And if you're unsure of what torque setting to do, it's worth checking with your frame manufacturer, as they may well slightly differ to what I've suggested here. Once you've got the front wheel installed, quick final check over to make sure you're happy and everything's in place and working correctly, and you're ready to go. So the mudguards are installed, and I think it looks pretty smart, set up ready for winter, trying to keep me a little bit drier and a little bit cleaner. And if you really want the ultimate in dry feet and to try and keep your riding buddies as clean and dry as possible, you can even modify your mudguards slightly with an additional bit of plastic or an R-saver, GCN of course, which you can trim to shape, and then you can drill 2 little holes and zip tie it in place, and it would sit further down and offer much greater protection for your feet and, like I said, the people riding behind. Or if you want to just upgrade later on down the line. Hope you found this maintenance video helpful. If you have, please give it a big thumbs up, and why not let me know in the comments section down below what you think of mudguards and if you're going to consider using them. See you later.